The Kroot are a savage Xenos species native to the forested world of Peck. The Kroot are a mercenary race, willing to offer their services as scouts, trackers, and bodyguards to anyone willing to pay them. They also sport an unstable genetic makeup, which allows the Kroot to undergo controlled evolution by eating the flesh of other species and in turn absorbing their unique physical traits. If Kroot consume the flesh of orcs, they will eventually gain an increase in muscle mass, and if they consume the flesh of an Eldari, they'll eventually develop into psychers. However, this is not an exact science, and the Kroot can sometimes mutate into evolutionary dead ends, such as the ape-like Krootox and the massive Greater Narlock. Out of all the sentient races within the galaxy, the Kroot are most commonly associated with the Tau Empire. This is mainly due to the fact that during the earliest days of the Tau Empire's first wave of expansion, the Tau would aid the Kroot in repelling an Orc war that was in the midst of overrunning the Kroot homeworlds. This event would eventually become known as the War in the Place of Union. Since then, the Kroot have been frequently utilized by the Tau Empire as shock and assault troops, overwhelming their foes with blind aggression and sheer brute force. But some have indeed speculated if there is in fact more to the Kroot's loyalty to the Tau Empire than a simple business relationship or any notion of honor in aiding those who liberated their homeworlds. Is the majority of the Kroot race in fact being oppressed by the Tau Empire? What's important to note about the Tau Empire's method of conquest is that they will very rarely resort to brute military force compared to other races such as humans or orcs. Instead, the Tau will usually conquer through subtlety and subversion, using the silver-tongued members of the Water Caste to show other races how much more their lives would be enriched if they accepted the greater good. But this doesn't mean that the Tau Empire is above using deception, mental manipulation, and subtle coercion to subjugate other races. An example of such acts comes from the race known as the Vespid. The Vespid are a technologically advanced insectoid species who are utilized by the Tau Empire as aerial assault troops that are organized into what are known as strains. But what's interesting to note is that when the Tau first encountered the Vespid themselves would not allow themselves to be annexed by the Tau Empire, nor would they submit to the teachings of the greater good. This is in part due to how utterly alien the mindset of the Vespid is in comparison to that of the Tau. To this end, the Ethereal Caste, the ruling elite of Tau society, gifted the leaders of the Vespid, known as Strain Leaders, with specialized pieces of headgear known as Communion Helms. Once the Strain Leaders donned these Communion Helms, they submitted to the Tau Empire almost immediately. Now, some have speculated that this simply allowed the Tau to communicate more effectively with the Vespid, and in turn utilize the sheer charisma of the Water and Ethereal castes. Others, however, such as the Inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos, have hypothesized that these Communion Helms are in fact altering the very brain chemistry of the Strain Leaders to effectively brainwash them, and by proxy bring entire strains of Vespid under the Tau Empire's direct control. So could the Kroot be suffering from a similar fate? Are they in fact being manipulated or even threatened into compliance with the teachings of the Tau Empire? Kroot societies, known as kindreds, are typically led by individuals known as Shapers. These Shapers are those members of Kroot society who decide the evolutionary path of their kindreds by deciding what is and is not acceptable for the Kroot to consume. Since becoming a member species of the Tau Empire, the Kroot have been forbidden from eating the corpses of Tau. Officially, this is out of respect for the Tau who helped save the Kroot worlds, but there could be a darker inclination here. As mentioned earlier, whenever Kroot eat the flesh of other species, they will adopt the traits associated with that particular race, such as the strength of the orcs and the agility of the Eldari. But there is always the possibility that the Shapers are somehow being manipulated by the Tau to prevent the Kroot from gaining any kind of potentially advantageous traits from Tau DNA, in addition to making their kindreds swear fealty to the Tau Empire. While the Tau Empire is overt in their utilization of communion helms to manipulate the Vespid, a similar device could have been constructed to manipulate the Shapers. However, instead of being a piece of ostentatious headgear, the tool used to subvert the free will and independence of the Kroot could in fact take the form of a cybernetic implant. As it stands, the Tau Empire has had a history of performing covert experimentation upon members of the Kroot through the utilization of cybernetic implants. Within the novel Blades of Damocles, the Ultramarines battled the forces of the Tau Empire for control of the world of Daleth. An assault squad under the command of Sergeant Numitor encountered what could best be described as Kroot servitors. As the Astartes fight against these cyborg Kroot, Numitor notes the following about these particular specimens.
These Kroot seemed to be muscle and bone, but inhabiting them were heretical machine intelligences, more like the drones they had encountered in the cradle chamber than living, sentient creatures. It made little difference. They would die, artificial or not. Numitor hustled past a Kroot corpse, its skull laid open by a chainsword slash to reveal the circuitry beneath. He had seen a similar sight on Sacred Macragge, the aftermath of a training regime involving the blade servitors of ancient practice cages. Like the servitors, these Kroot creatures were not true warriors, but test subjects, puppet troops devised only for theoretical conflicts. Numitor's mind raced. Do the Tau have plans to make war upon their long-standing allies, the Kroot? Do they seek to master every eventuality? Every possible clash before it even started? Perhaps, said a nagging voice in Numitor's mind, this nascent Xenos Empire was a true danger after all.
Now, it's important to note that while the Kroot themselves are capable of utilizing advanced technologies, such as weaponry or starships, for the most part, the Kroot choose to lead simple, almost primitive lives in order to keep their species strong. As such, it seems extremely unlikely that the Kroot would alter themselves with cybernetic augmentation like other races. These particular Kroot servitors were part of an experiment by the Earthcast master scientist, Ovesa, who was also known as the Stone Dragon. Ovesa had been studying the Kroot for a long time, and had even sought for ways to make the Kroot more obedient. To this end, Ovesa had even constructed an artificial recreation of the Kroot homeworld of Pek in order to obtain more data so that his facsimiles would better ape Kroot behaviour to casual observers. Ovesa's research and experiments was something that the Tau commander known as Chasseur Viola Chauva Montier, or Commander Farsight to the Imperium, found to be extremely repulsive. Farsight explained to Ovesa his fears of a potential backlash from the Kroot if the Kroot ever learned of these experiments.
If the Shapers get word you are analysing their kindreds in such detail, let alone making programmable analogues of their people, you will have endangered our relationship with our closest allies, and in doing so, weakened the entire Tau Empire.
Given Farsight's honourable nature, he would be one of the few high-ranking members of Tau society at that time that would have indeed condemned such actions against the Kroot. In fact, it was Farsight who spoke out against Ovesa performing such experiments in the first place. However, there is nothing to suggest that such experimentation upon the Kroot ever ceased. In fact, many members of the Kroot race could have indeed been cybernetically altered into one of these various facsimiles, in order to reinforce the Tau Empire's stranglehold upon the Kroot race. This way, the Kroot can be reprogrammed to think whatever the Tau Empire wishes for them to think, to live and to die for the greater good. What do you think? Are the Kroot oppressed, or are they simply loyal? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.